Hello, everyone, and many thanks for joining this stream on this Saturday. Uh, Happy Saturday to you all, and a great weekend. Today, 16th of August, 11 o'clock in the morning, Moscow time. And as you can notice, dear friends, I'm back to my traditional temporary studio, one might say, or improvised studio in Moscow. 3 weeks summer holiday in North City, Alanya is over, and we are back to Russian capital. And we arrived just a few hours ago, early this morning, and I did not really had much time to prepare news segment in the best possible way, but I did try, by the way, and in news segment, I'm gonna share with you all the main news that Russian media and the public is paying attention to and talking about. Hopefully, you will find news segment informative and useful. And if so, please don't forget to like the video. And after streamer, if you can, please leave some commentary about any topic you find interesting that will help to deal with the algorithm and potentially reach wider audience. And I will just add before I start with the news that during the stream you can use super chat feature on my Rumble channel. I'm streaming on both my channels simultaneously on YouTube and Rumble. So if you want to support my work or support my work and same time highlight certain question or topic, you can use that super chat feature on Rumble. This way I would not miss your question for sure. And also, let me remind you that tomorrow we will have a traditional bigger community chat, Sunday community chat, and fundraising stream. Hopefully, it will work out so that I will be less stressful for next week doing this work. Okay, that's been said, dear friends. Let's start news segment itself now. And of course, first of all, news about meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin that took place today by Russian time in Alaska, although it was yesterday by US time, right? And so, yes, meeting went quite interestingly, I will say. Probably many of you have already seen headlines in Western media, which is going absolute crazy, by the way. Western propaganda outlets are not happy, one might argue, but nevertheless, probably you are interested in how Russian media, Russian public perceive this meeting. And whole morning, by the way, I was monitoring media outlets, comments from public figures and ordinary citizen like me and you. And what can I say is that reaction here in Russia is quite positive, I will say, on this meeting. And you can clearly see some cautious optimism in the comments of majority of people that are actually commenting on this matter, which is quite understandable. I myself, monitoring the situation, have a very same impression that probably we do have some reasons to be cautiously optimistic after this meeting. Although initially, my position was quite critical. I was thinking that, Russian president probably will waste time agreeing on this meeting with Trump. But, things turned out in a way that probably we do have some reasons to be at least a little bit more optimistic than I was a couple of days ago. Nevertheless, let's go through some details. I give you some points that Russian media picked on and paid attention to. So RIA Novosti is reporting about this meeting with the headline that you can see on your screen: How Putin and Trump's talk went. Chronicle of their events. So Trump, by the way, personally met Russian president at their airfield in Anchorage. Let me give you short video of that. Western media did not like even that Trump actually greeted Putin. Do I have the video though? I should. This is not the one. Okay, let me find there. Sorry, dear friends, as I said there, I only had like a minute or two to prepare the program, and but nevertheless, I have a meeting between the presidents, so quite warm welcome. Leaders are expressing few words there, and according to some reports in Russian media, by the way, Russian president said to Donald Trump exactly at that point when they meet each other that he welcomed, who he greeted Trump as a neighbor, by the way, because after all, Russia and US are neighbors, right? Neighboring countries, and he also said there's something online that he's happy to see him alive, which is also quite interesting comment to make, and there has a basis for that. After all, Trump actually survived the assassination attempt, and Russian president in past quite a few times mentioned the courage of Trump, pointing out on his reaction after he basically dodged the bullet, right? Somehow by miracle, or I don't know what that was. So yes, quite a warm welcome, by the way, that we can see there two presidents basically simultaneously left their planes in Anchorage and then went to that military base where main part of negotiations took place. So yes, Trump personally met the Russian president. They traveled to the summit venue together in the US president's limousine and began talking in the car. And dear friends, if I have any criticism for now about this meeting, there is one that I have to point it out, which is that, Russian president actually used the limousine of U.S. president. He actually used the limousine of U.S. president. Let me show you a video of that if I have it here. I guess I don't have that video, but yes, that's the only criticism I have of this meeting. I don't think it was truly safe to use limousine of U.S. president, but nevertheless, I guess Russian security services knew upfront that this kind of decision will be made, and probably they checked out the limousine. I guess, I don't know, but I did not like that. I have to be honest. Then they traveled to summit venue together in, as I said, in U.S. president's limousine. Politicians refrained from making introductory remarks before their conversation began. Although their friends, probably you were watching at least partially reports from the venue. And what can I highlight is that Western so-called journalists were acting like morons, basically. Probably if you were Westerner, probably you were kind of embarrassed because this is not the way professional journalists should act. They were shouting over each other, and it was a total mess. At one point, Russian president impression on his face was like, "What the hell is going on?" Right? Probably you have seen that video. It was a mess, by the way. So therefore, quite understandable that president did not talk no questions, because if Russian journalists would act with respect towards the both presidents, Western journalists, so-called journalists, clearly are not capable of acting with respect. They are illiterate, uneducated, freaking morons, right? And I wonder why Trump is bringing this crazies when on all the venues that he's entering. What the hell is wrong with the presidential press service in US? They should pick some journalists that actually had at least some level of culture, right? and at least they will listen to each other. But this is US's problem, right? Or problem of the Western elites and their media, so-called media, I will say. So therefore, two leaders definitely had reasons to avoid making introductory remarks and exchange words with the journalists or so-called journalists from the West. The negotiations took place in a free-on-free format with the American side represented by Trump, Rubio, head of State Department, and Witkoff, and Moscow was represented by Russian President Putin, Foreign Minister Lavrov, and the aide of Russian President Yuri Ushakov. Conversation lasted 2 hours and 45 minutes approximately, after which the president spoke to journalists. Although yet again, there was basically this press conference went in a conservative manner. Leaders made their statements, and that was it basically. According to Bloomberg, the meeting was the longest ever. Well, okay, maybe I did not monitor how long meetings of two presidents are taking place, are taking in time. Putin and Trump expressed the two countries' determination to achieve results and noted a large number of areas for joint work. And this is very important, dear friends, because as I said a couple of days ago in my previous updates, basically, this meeting, in my opinion, would be and was actually more about bilateral relationships than about Ukraine and Ukrainian crisis. And I think we have good enough reasons to believe that that was exactly their case. The Russian president thanked his American counterpart for the invitation and pointed out the close proximity of the two countries, despite the fact that they are separated by an ocean. And this is true, by the way. Let me show you how close two countries actually are. I'm not sure Western so-called journalists even know about it, but well, this is Russia on the left side on your screen. This is US, Alaska, which used to be Russia. And in middle of Bering Strait, by the way, there is two islands, Big Diamond Island, which belongs to Russia, and Small Diamond Island, which belongs to US, and distance between these two islands is just a couple of miles. That's about it, right? So two countries truly are very close to each other. And let me continue what also RIA Novosti pointed out. So the Russian president thanked his American counterpart for the invitation and pointed out the close proximity of the two countries, despite the fact that they are separated by ocean. Politicians have declared their readiness to work towards ending their conflict in Ukraine. According to Trump, there is still no agreement on important points of settlement, but there is a good chance of reaching an agreement. And this is also important because despite their expectations of some, Russian side did not agree on whatever terms Trump had about this temporary 30 or whatever day ceasefire, right? That globalists and Western ruling class are desperate to reach because they won't break for their proxy Kyiv regime and their militants. The head of White House admitted that the next meeting would take place in Moscow. Well, what happened is that Russian president actually publicly during the press conference expressed the opinion that next meeting hopefully will take place in Moscow, and Trump reacted in a quite awkward way. Probably he imagined to himself what would the Western so-called media will do to him, right? They will go absolute crazy as they are now, or even bigger than that, right? But I can give you some video, by the way, on that. exact moment. That's it.
We'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all.
So you can see how dependent Trump actually is on PR, on public relations, isn't it? Which is not really a good thing, especially for a president. President should do whatever is necessary without much care about what this corrupt so-called media, especially in the West, gonna say about it, right? I don't think any of us would argue about that. Also, dear friends, Trump also went to call on Vladimir Zelensky to make a deal with Russia. The possibility of peace depends on him and European countries, Trump said, and I can give you a short video on that too.
And a lot of points we're agreed on. But there's not that much. There's, one or two pretty significant items, but I think they can be reached. Now it's really up to President Zelensky to get it done. And I would also say the European nations, they have to get involved a little bit. But it's up to President Zelensky. I think we are, and if they'd like, I'll be at that next meeting. They're going to set up a meeting now between President Zelensky and President Putin. And myself, I guess, I didn't ask you about it. Not that I want to be there, but I want to make sure it gets done. And we have a pretty good chance of getting it done.
So, judging by the statement of Trump, one might argue that maybe, despite the statement of Trump that they did not reach agreements, maybe they are very close to understanding of positions of each other. Otherwise, why would Trump say that now it's up to Zelensky if progress will be reached on the ground? I guess two sides, Putin and Trump, and delegations of two countries actually did manage to find the common ground. Otherwise, Trump would not say what he says. Would not you agree with me? I think that is the case. And in upcoming days, probably we will find out what exactly sides did manage to agree on or find their positions close enough, right? What else RIA Novosti is highlighting here? After the talks, Putin visited the ceremony where Soviet pilots are buried in Anchorage, by the way, just a few kilometers away from that military base that two presidents have had a meeting. And I can show this was a very nice, very good gesture from Russian president for sure. And people here in Russia and worldwide, I think, would appreciate this move from Russian president. This is the video. And by the way, Russian president during their talks with the Trump highlighted during a press conference, basically in his speech, he highlighted that Russia and or Soviet Union, Russia was a part of which, and the U.S. were allies during the Second World War while fighting Nazi Germany, and in Russian territory, in Russian Far East, there is a cemetery where U.S. militaries, U.S. pilots are buried, and cemetery is well preserved and respected. There is a flags of two countries there, and everything is done as it should be, right? And the Russian president was grateful that cemetery and memorial of Soviet pilots were also kept in good shape with respect, right? This is something that contradicts actions and attitude of Europeans, for example. In many European countries, as you know, dear friends, and I have reported in my previous updates quite a number of times, unfortunately, tragically, I will say, in many European countries, memorial places, cemeteries of Soviet soldiers, memorials commemorating heroism of Soviet soldiers, officers that were liberating Europe from Nazis were destroyed and decimated, which is shame basically on those countries, isn't it? Decent leadership of countries should never ever allow this to happen, because it's just too low. It's just too low. But I guess for European so-called elites, nothing is low enough. They in the generation, European so-called elites have no bottom, basically. That's how it is. But from Russian president, definitely this visit to cemetery to pay gratitude to memory of heroes definitely will be received here in Russia and worldwide, by the way, in many countries with appreciation. This is definitely a right move to do, right step to do. Let me continue with some more details. Results of negotiations, according to RIA Novosti. Trump personally met with Putin. Okay, we already said that. Yeah, that was it, I guess. Then separate news. Let me continue with some more reports. Well, Russian president during joint press conference with Trump stated that today's agreement will help to restart pragmatic relations between the countries. Putin thanked also Trump for his friendly tone and results-oriented approach. And I can give you a video on that too. Better to listen once to President himself.
President Trump, for the work that we've had today, for the friendly tone of conversation, for the goal-oriented approach, results-oriented approach. We can see clearly what the United States wants to achieve. President Trump certainly sincerely cares for the future of his country. At the same time, he understands that Russia has its own national interests. I'm sure that today's agreements will help us restart pragmatic relations between Russia and the United States and help us start on the path towards resolution in Ukraine. And
dear friends, if you're watching press conference, you probably noticed that Russian leader stated right there that to resolve, while talking about Ukrainian crisis, he directly stated that root causes of the crisis have to be addressed, and all interests of the Russian Federation, just interests of Russian Federation, have to be acknowledged and addressed. This is very important because, yet again, there was a lot of speculations, by the way, before this meeting took place, that Putin or Russia would agree on some concessions. That's why Putin agreed on this meeting. But no, in reality, Russia is in a stronger position. I said this many times in my previous updates, that Russian leader is going into this meeting from stronger position, right? On the battlefield, the Russian troops are winning in this proxy war that West is waging against Russia. Dream of Western so-called elites to isolate Russia failed. Their dream to destroy Russian economy has failed. as their dream to disintegrate Russia, right? So clearly, Moscow is in a stronger position. Russian president went to Alaska and in face to Donald Trump publicly stated that the root causes of the crisis have to be addressed, and Russian just interests, Russian strategical interests, especially in terms of security architecture, have to be acknowledged also, acknowledged and respected. This is very important. This is very important. And yet again, dear friends, I have this, my understanding of this situation is, as I said in previous updates, that this meeting truly was more about bilateral relationships than Ukrainian crisis. And Russia is offering, not the first time, kind of off-ramp to US leadership, to America first forces in US to pull out their country from this proxy war that globalists provoked against Russia and used US as their enforcer, as they were doing it for decades before, right? So my hope is that, these America First forces will actually take this opportunity, this offer from Moscow, and pull out US from this proxy war. As I said, there is a we can have a cautious optimism about that. Although, of course, more time is needed. Let's see how Trump or how U.S. administration going to behave in the days to come. Let me continue, dear friends, with some other news. For example, Trump himself also priced a warm meeting with the Russian president. So according to RT, US President Donald Trump has described his summit in Alaska with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, as a warm meeting and suggested that the Ukraine conflict is close to being resolved. Yet again, dear friends, there were constantly in the public, two leaders were talking about Ukraine, mostly Trump, but main topics of discussion during this almost 3-hour negotiations was not the Ukrainian crisis, but bilateral relationships. I'm quite sure about it. And I think sides actually did manage to reach certain agreements, and probably they already have a plan in place, at least I hope so, how to move towards cooperation in certain fields, right? And how to operate in a way effectively so that this Ukrainian crisis would not be distraction, would not be main distraction for bilateral relationships, for improvement in bilateral relationships. And the two countries definitely can cooperate in many, many areas, by the way, which will benefit not just Russia and US, but also whole world. And I said quite a number of times before, isn't it, that US, if led by pragmatic policies, definitely have every chances to maintain a serious stance on a geopolitical scale in this emerging multipolar world, while ruled by extremist Europe is doomed to transform in next 20 to 30 years into a loosely relevant or completely irrelevant part of Eurasia. And it's up to US political class, US elites, these America First forces in US, how successful they will be to secure US's future, right? And if they want to do so, if they want to be successful in this regards, they have to find ways to pull out US from this proxy war against Russia, and they have to be more bold, by the way. They cannot play around the globalists, right, and their agendas. They have to be strong, and they have to say straight what is their US's interests. And clearly, proxy war or direct war between US and Russia is not in interests of anybody in US, definitely not for US citizens, and definitely not for US political class, because that would be end of everything, for sure, right? In an interview with the Fox News, the US leader praised their 3-hour talk with Putin in Anchorage on Friday, noting that they had made progress in talks mainly focused on ending their hostilities between Russia and Ukraine. Okay, that's what Trump is saying, but I think this meeting was mainly based on bilateral relationships. Let me give you a shorter clip of Trump's interview.
Again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you.
This one is there is another video. I guess I don't have it. Okay, I mean, yet again, I did not have much time to prepare the program, so I messed up a little bit. I was thinking I did prepare a video. Okay. My apologies, dear friends. When you are operating alone with all this technical stuff, sometimes you're gonna mess up, man. But anyways, let me continue. We have a quote from Trump here on RT. Actually, I think we agree on a lot. I can tell you the meeting was warm, Trump said, calling the Putin a strong guy. US leader earlier suggested that he would give today a 10 when it comes to outcome of the summit. According to Trump, their sights are pretty close to the end of the conflict, although he added that Ukraine has to agree to any potential peace deal. He would not provide any details of the discussions, saying only that there is one or two pretty significant items, but I think they can be reached. The US president also noted that he had always had a great relationships with President Putin, and we would have done greater things together, while praising Russia as a land brimming with natural resources. As I said, dear friends, even Trump cannot help himself. He did try to be focused to paint the picture that Ukraine was the main topic of discussion, but it was not. It was not, and he himself is actually highlighting this unwillingly, while saying that, well, there is a lot of potential to cooperate with Russia, right, in terms of natural resources and other topics too. Putin similarly described the talks with Trump as constructive and useful, saying Moscow was sincerely interested in putting an end to the hostilities. He also suggested that the two leaders could hold their next meeting in Moscow, with Trump replying that he could see it possibly happening. And who knows, by the way, maybe next meeting of two presidents will take place in Moscow, although based on the statements or the judgment of US independent experts, military experts, political experts, one might assume that Trump is easily influenced. Quite often, either Scott Ritter or Colonel Douglas McGregor or others, by the way, are saying that it is very important who is talking with Trump last. That's how easily he is manipulated. And therefore, today, we might have reasons to be cautiously optimistic, but things might change drastically in next several days. With Trump and his administration, you just never know. This is also something that we have to keep in mind. RIA Novosti is also reporting about Details of this meeting. Okay, I don't think this is that important. Some details that maybe went out of focus of the MSM. For example, Vladimir Putin was distracted for a moment from a conversation with Donald Trump on the red carpet, while U.S. strategical bomber B-2, accompanied by fighter jets, either F-35 or F-22. I have not seen footage, and quite often media is making mistakes in identification of these fighter jets. While this B-2 bomber was accompanied by the fighter jets, I saw a video from far. It was not enough to see fuselage of the plane to me to identify what kind of plane there was. But F-35s were escorting Russian president's plane on the way back to Russia. That's for sure. Symbolic place. The press conference following the meeting in the 3+3 format was also unusual. RIA Novosti is writing. Firstly, the presidents did not answer journalists' questions, and which is understandable, by the way. First of all, because of their very poor behavior of their Western so-called journalists. Probably many of you have seen how they were behaving, right? Shouting over each other's voices, addressing presidents of two countries with their total disrespect, by the way. I mean, you're not going to talk to nobody while acting this way, right? Shouting and acting like you are a freaking moron or something. So therefore, I understand why no questions were taken from nobody. And in the end, they only shook hands and exchanged a few phrases. Secondly, their statements are interesting. Okay, interesting. What else? Well, there is no deal yet, Trump said during his interview, I believe, with Fox News, and also during the press conference. Trump, in a turn, noted that Moscow and Washington managed to reach an agreement on some points, although not on Ukrainian matters. Okay. Okay, what else? What else? Foreign media, by the way, is going crazy, obviously, about this meeting. TASS news agency is reporting with the headline that Putin's triumph and no ceasefire in Ukraine. European media on Alaska summit. So European media analyzing their meeting of Russian and American presidents, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, in Alaska, point to the lack of details of the agreement reached and believe that the summit was more successful for the Russian leader. I will say summit if actual steps will follow in terms of improving bilateral relationships will be a tremendous step forward for both countries, because US and Russia can actually be very helpful partners, right? If both countries are acting with respect, and if both countries will take in account interests of others. And this is, I'm first of all saying about US, because US leadership are not used to take in account the interests of anybody, usually, right? So let's see if there will be some shift in attitude and behavior of the US political class, because potential is tremendous, absolutely tremendous. But nevertheless, let's go through some details here. I saw a number of articles, by the way, in Western media that was hysterical, absolutely hysterical. I'm interested what her TASS news agency paid attention to. So from the moment Vladimir Putin stepped off his plane or into the red, stepped his foot or step off his plane onto red carpet tarmac, the Alaska summit was a triumph for him, notes the British magazine The Economist. okay, Russian president definitely, you know, demonstrated confidence, and you know, he is a prophet, by the way. He is one of the few heavyweights on a geopolitical scale when it comes to politics, right? So why would anybody expect anything else? I mean, let's start from there. The Guardian is also writing, Guardian newspaper believes that Donald Trump left more questions than answers on Friday when he claimed great progress at the key summit with Vladimir Putin, but said there was no agreement to end Russia's war in Ukraine. This is not Russia's war in Ukraine. This is West's war, West's proxy war against Russia. To specify, to be clear here. The Financial Times comes to a similar conclusion. Donald Trump failed to extract any commitment from Vladimir Putin to end their war in Ukraine after an Alaska summit that began with fanfare and ended in disappointment. Disappointment for Western Russophobic so-called media, by the way, and the globalists that are in control of this MSM, right? As I said, we have enough indicators to assume that their mainly, I mean, from 2 hours and 45 minutes that two presidents and their aides spent together while negotiating, most likely main part of these negotiations were about improving bilateral relationships, and some, I don't know, 10-20% of time they probably spoke about Ukrainian crisis. They don't have to, by the way, talked about that any longer, because behind the closed doors delegations were obviously working, and US knows perfectly well what Russia's position is, where Russia stands, and therefore there is no much to add there, right? While in terms of bilateral relationships, there is a lot of stuff to discuss, a lot of directions to in which sides can test the ground if they can reach agreements. So that's why there was no specifics on topic of Ukrainian crisis, either from Trump or from Russian president. Although, by the way, Putin was definitely more specific. He said that Russia is very much interested in ending this war, ending this conflict, proxy war, I will add, that West is waging against Russia. And to do so, root causes have to be addressed, and the Russian national interests have to be acknowledged. So Russian president was actually quite clear, by the way. And if anybody don't know more details about Russian view of a roadmap towards the sustainable peace, I will recommend to read some articles about statements of Russian president on July 14th, that was, I believe, 2024, when Putin went to have a meeting with the leadership of Russian foreign ministry. He was quite specific at that meeting in regards to this roadmap that can actually lead towards sustainable peace. Let's continue. The BBC Broadcasting Corporation, British propaganda outlet, by the way, emphasized the lack of agreement on organizing the future meeting with Vladimir Zelensky. Yet again, they all are focused, by the way, on Ukrainian crisis. And partially because that's what globalists want, right? They wanted a 30-day ceasefire or break for their proxy and their forces on the battlefield, and at the same time, they don't want to hear anything about potential improvement of the relationships between Russia and US. They are afraid of that. And that's why all the media outlets, or so-called media outlets in the West, practically all of them were critical and hysterical about this meeting. It seems that Trump, being a man who likes to present himself as a peacemaker and a master of deals, left Alaska in neither capacity. There is also no indication of preparations for summit with the participation of Vladimir Zelensky in the foreseeable future, the publication said. And Yet again, BBC and every other media outlet in the West can go absolute bonkers, but Russian president was very clear about meeting with Zelensky. He said last time, it was like a couple of weeks ago, isn't it, when he was asked, he said he has no issue with a face-to-face meeting with anybody, right, including Zelensky, but such a meeting to take place, sides have to reach certain agreements. Otherwise, what is the point to meet, right? What is the point to have a meeting with Zelensky if Zelensky gonna use their venue as an opportunity for him to come up with some show, right? And if no progress will be made in regards to de-escalation. If two sides will reach agreements, then in that case, yes, Russian president is open to have a meeting with Zelensky and with anybody. I mean, you know, if it's necessary. So therefore, it is good to see that Western media is hysterical again. By the way, they hate. By the way, any positivity in relationships between Russia and any other country, and especially between Russia and the U.S. The German TV channel NTV concludes that it is impossible to talk about an immediate ceasefire based on the results of a meeting, which is true, by the way. There was no agreement. Russia did not agree on no temporary solutions, and the Russian position was very clear that Moscow has no interest, or Russia has no interest in temporary solutions. Russia is interested in a sustainable peace, which requires root causes to be addressed. I mean, how many times Russian leaders going to repeat this so that Western so-called elites will finally understand? I don't know. But they do understand perfectly well what Russia is saying, but they are just ignoring. They are ignoring Russian position. That's what it is. Although how long they're going to manage to do this, that's a whole different story, especially if Moscow will be successful in reaching certain behind the closed doors, let's say, agreements with the US, and if Moscow will manage to withdraw through diplomacy to basically stimulate Washington, US leadership to withdraw their country, to withdraw US from this proxy war against Russia, hopefully fully, in worst case, partially, but in any ways, that would be good progress for two countries. The DPA agency assess the results of the meeting. Similarly, we have quote from this news agency, the Trump-Putin summit ended without announcing a ceasefire during their subsequent 12-minute press conference with Putin. Trump spoke about reaching agreements on important issues without going into details, the report emphasized. And these important issues that Trump mentioned are about bilateral relationships, because yet again, Russian position in regards to Ukrainian crisis is well known to everybody who wants to hear and who wants to understand, right? And that's why Trump said it's up to Zelensky now and up to Europeans. If they will agree on the terms that Russia has, then okay, there will be peace, because root causes will be addressed and Russian security concerns will be addressed. But if globalists, let's say, if their control regimes in Europe and their proxy regime would not agree on Russian terms, then conflict will continue. That's how it is, right? European publication Politico is US publication, isn't it? Not the European. Correct me if I'm wrong, but nevertheless, publication Politico points to the advantage of the Russian president following their meeting in Alaska. He looked pleased and they're having gotten the most out of the meeting. He achieved this without any significant concessions, such as a preliminary ceasefire. Moreover, he left encouraged without promising a truce either. The French newspaper Le Figaro focuses on the topic of relations between the leaders of the two countries. And never before has an American president maintained such ambiguous relations as Trump with Putin. Never before has a Russian president had such a direct access to an American president, publication claims. Well, I don't think it is a bad thing if two presidents can actually have a direct communication, easy access for direct communication, let's say, especially when we are talking about presidents of the two major nuclear superpowers. I mean, what is wrong with that? Something is wrong with Figaro, I guess, right? This French media outlet, but definitely not with their situation when two presidents of major nuclear superpowers can actually, in short notice, communicate. It's a good stuff, if anything. The Belgian lessor believes that the summit will lead to increased cooperation between Moscow and Washington. Expectations were high, the results were mixed. The meeting between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump ended without a real agreement. However, the summit in Anchorage demonstrated that the thawing of Russian-American relations, the article said, okay. I mean, few reactions from Western media, by the way, but I have seen much more, and well, Western MSM is going crazy. Western MSM is going crazy about this meeting, and we have reaction from Russian Foreign Ministry on this insanity of the Western media. For example, Maria Zakharova spoke about their topic, and let me give you some details on that. Western media have erupted in hysteria over U.S. President Donald Trump's cordial welcome for his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, in Alaska on Friday. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova stated, Zakharova weighed in on the 3-hour negotiations in Anchorage that brought Putin to U.S. soil for the first time in more than a decade. The Russian leader was greeted at the airport with the red carpet and the flyover of U.S. fighter jets and that B-2 bomber. He and Trump then rolled together in the U.S. president's limousine. I did not like that, but that's what happened, to the summit venue. While their sides did not announce any deal on Ukraine, Putin described the talks as constructive, with Trump calling the meeting warm and suggested that Moscow and Washington are pretty close to settling the Ukrainian conflict. Zakharova noted that Western media had plunged into frenzy bordering on complete madness over their honors given to the Russian leader. For 3 years, they spoke of Russia's isolation, and today they saw red carpet rolled out to meet the Russian president in the U.S., she said. Sky News sits at great power diplomacy to avoid nuclear Armageddon. Trump leaves the summit with Vladimir Putin humiliated, yes, sir, because trying to avoid the prospect of nuclear war in the most serious and escalating proxy war Russia and US have ever thought would be. I guess this is Twitter from Zakharova. Western media is attempting to frame the Alaska summit as a diplomatic win for Moscow. The Washington Post wrote that the warmth of their welcome sent shock through Ukraine and Europe, while pointing to the stark contrast with the reception of Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky at the White House in February, when Trump accused the Ukrainian leader of disrespect, ingratitude over U.S. aid, and of gambling with the World War III. And, okay, by the way, there is no need to continue. Basically, we're going to hear today also many hysterical statements from either European politicians or their allies in U.S., especially among U.S. Democrats, U.S. neocons, and media, so-called media outlets that they are in control of. And of course, European politicians are going to go complete crazy. Only break they will have is their fear of Trump's reaction if they will criticize Trump too much, right? But they're going to be very much upset, quite sure about it. And today we will see statements on that. Also, as I said, Russian president went to cemetery of Soviet pilots a few kilometers away from military bases where that meeting did take place. This was a definitely honorable gesture from him. RT is reporting that, well, as I already mentioned, dear friends, Trump said that Zelensky should make a deal now, which means basically that Zelensky has to agree on Russian terms. It's not just about Zelensky, although it's about globalists and globalist control regimes in Europe. They have to agree on Russian terms because it's Russia that is winning in this war that West provoked, right? So therefore, as I said many times before, this conflict will end on Russian terms. That's the only way, by the way. And I really hope Moscow and America First forces in the US will manage to find the ways, basically, to begin improving relationships between the two countries and to pull out US from this proxy war, because there is nothing for US in this war, right? And this horrible tradition of in US that this country is used as an enforcer by the globalists for many, many decades has to end. And US society have to wake up to this reality that their country was used as a freaking enforcer by all sorts of foreign groups of interests, globalists, Zionists, and so on, and did not serve actually interests of the US citizens. This realization actually has to be settled in, right? And people have to be told about it openly, right? America First people have to tell them openly what was going on. That since their execution, basically, that's what that was. Since the execution of JFK, U.S. did not really have a president that was actually serving U.S. interests 100%, and U.S. was always, since their execution of Kennedy, by deep state, by CIA, potentially by Mossad, with Mossad's involvement, U.S. for always since that tragic day was controlled by outside forces and used as an enforcer, because this is true. This is just true, right? Also, dear friends, we have this report that from RIA Novosti, that Zelensky plans to meet with Trump on Monday. Originally, this was reported by Axios, and okay, I guess some preliminary agreement already have been reached between this Western-backed terrorist regime in Kiev and Washington, so that Zelensky will fly to U.S. Capitol to meet Donald Trump. Let's see how that meeting will take place, if it will happen. And let me also share, dear friends, with you reaction of former Russian president and current deputy chairman of the Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, on this meeting between Trump and Putin. So Dmitry Medvedev on the initial results of the meeting between the leaders of Russia and the US in Alaska. First point, a full-fledged mechanism for a meeting between Russia and the US at the highest level has been restored. Calm, without ultimatums or the threats. Second point that Medvedev is making, the president of Russia personally and in detail presented to the president of the US our conditions for the ending of the conflict in Ukraine. And these conditions are well known, by the way. Nothing has changed since the July of 2024, when Vladimir Putin spoke about this roadmap, Russian vision of the roadmap towards the sustainable peace, while he was meeting, as I already said, with the leadership of Russian Foreign Ministry. But yes, it is important that Russian president directly spoke about this with the US president. Third point from Medvedev, following an almost 3-hour conversation, the head of the White House refused to escalate pressure on Russia, at least for now. And during that interview with the Fox News differencer, I saw a short fragment. Trump went to say that he will need at least 2-3 weeks, and then he might decide if any additional sanctions on Russia will be implemented. And for God's sake, I mean, I guess it is time Western countries to stop talking about sanctions on Russia. What they gonna sanction? What else they gonna sanction? It just looks laughable, right? And I think Trump understands that. These talks about sanctions is just laughable. It's already like 30,000 plus sanctions on Russia, and our country is the most sanctioned ever in history. What they gonna sanction next? I mean, oxygen that is generated from Russian forest or what? It's insane, right? Fourth point that, but it is good that straight after the meeting with the Russian president, while having an interview with Fox News, Trump did not escalate in his rhetoric. He was quite diplomatic, which is a rare occasion, by the way. Trump, how much he loves to act tough and brag about everything, right? But nevertheless, he was quite diplomatic. Fourth point from Medvedev, the meeting proved their negotiations are possible without preconditions and simultaneously with the continuation of the special military operation, which is also true, by the way. I will remind you that while the US was engaged in a war with Vietnam, negotiations with the North Vietnamese leadership was taking place for 3 or 4 years, while there was a full-scale conflict going on the ground. So this false narrative that was created in the West, that how you're going to negotiate while there is a fighting going on, I mean, you can negotiate perfectly well if you want to, right? And you don't have to go any further than US recent history for that, examples, right? And as I said, 3 or 4 years, US was engaged in negotiations with North Vietnamese. Negotiations were taking place in France, I believe, right? So definitely in Europe, by the way. It was France, I believe. So yes, good point. And fifth point and main, as Medvedev is pointing out, both sides directly place the responsibility for achieving future results in negotiations on ending military crises on Kiev and Europe, which is also important, by the way. Trump, in that interview with the Fox News, actually said that now it's up to Zelensky and the Europeans. And while mentioning Europeans, obviously, one may assume that he's talking about globalists and the globalist control regimes in Europe. First of all, UK, France, Germany, and so on, right? And then the little ones. So this is the first reaction from Dmitry Medvedev, also a positive one, isn't it? That's why I said, by the way, based on my reading of the overall situation, I myself also is quite optimistic about this meeting, cautiously optimistic, let me say that way, because clearly there is a possibility that we will see some improvement in relationships between US and Russia, which will benefit definitely both countries and the rest of the world for sure, right? And dear friends, before I continue with the rest of the news, and I do have quite a few to share in this new segment, Let me just notice that this media project, as you know, is completely subscriber funded, which means that my channels only exist as long as I have your support. And if you like my work, if you like my channels, please consider to support my work and to maintain this project. Basically, you can do it through several means. You can donate with their PayPal platform. You can donate with their Boosty platform. You can subscribe to my Patreon page or page on Boosty. You can use crypto for this matter. Also, there is a crypto option there. And during the live streams, you can use a super chat feature on Rumble, and you can become premium subscriber on my Rumble channel. Obviously, all support counts, and many thanks to everybody who already supported and continues to support and keeps me in this field of news and political commentary. Thank you very much. And dear friends, if you are interested to support, all the links, all the addresses are on this video in description box, and on YouTube I will also pin a comment after the stream. And let me also remind you, dear friends, that please click that like button if you so far like this video, this live stream. It might help to reach wider audience. That's been said, dear friends, let me continue with some more news and what I have next. Well, in that interview with Fox News, dear friends, Trump said that there was one bigger issue that he didn't agree with Putin. He did not specify what he means by this, but let's listen to this short video. Maybe you would understand better than I did. This is the video.
Progress.
The meeting took place in this room.
Yeah.
This is where you met, right in this room.
Did. Well, let me examine it. Oh, there it is.
That's where you were sitting.
That's it. I would say that's it. Yep.
So did you have alone time with him?
Yeah, I did. And I did actually after our speeches. He made a very good speech, and I also finished it up. And afterwards, we spoke. Right after that, we spoke very sincerely. I think he wants to see it done.
Yeah. In your press conference, you talked about a lot of things that you agreed on, and maybe one big issue you don't agree on. Are you prepared to go public with that?
No, I'd rather not. I guess somebody's going to go public with it. They'll figure it out. But no, I don't want to do that. I want to see if we can get it done. You know, it's not a done deal at all. Mm-hmm. And Ukraine has to agree. I mean, you know, President Zelensky has to agree. But it's a terrible war where he's losing a lot, and both of them are. And hopefully it can get completed. That'll be a great achievement for them. Forget about me, for them. And you'll save 7,000 lives a week. That's a lot.
I spoke very briefly to Secretary of State Rubio, and he did say to me, he goes...
Okay. So as you can see, dear friends, Trump spoke about this one issue that he disagreed with the Russian president or did not find a common ground on the topic. My guess is that he's talking about this ceasefire, 30-day ceasefire that Western ruling class is desperate to have as a break for their proxies in Kiev. What do you think about it? I mean, what that one topic is that Trump is talking about there? If it's not this 30-day ceasefire, I guess it is 30-day ceasefire. And he also mentioned there that you know, to have agreement, Zelensky has to agree also. And well, Zelensky knows perfectly well. Zelensky and his globalist masters, they know perfectly well what Russia's conditions are, right? And they can actually end the military phase of this crisis today, right now. All they have to do is make a statement that, well, they agree on Russian terms, and then they have to begin withdrawing troops from all new Russian regions. and then there will be ground, good enough ground, some meaningful talks to take place. And the Russian president was very clear, by the way, during that meeting in July 2024 in Russia's foreign ministry, when he said that moment Kiev regime will withdraw its forces from new Russian regions, Kherson region, Zaporozhye region, I can remind you, parts of DPR, and there is some forestry areas in LPR where Kiev regime still might have some DRGs. They, or the moment Kiev regime and their NATO backers or the globalists will withdraw their forces from these Russian territories, Russian leader Vladimir Putin will order Russian militaries to cease military operations. Putin was very clear on that, isn't it? And then negotiations, actual meaningful negotiations between Moscow and Kiev might begin about full-scale resolution and sustainable peace. So I guess that's why Trump said there, it's up to Zelensky also, which is true, and it's up to globalists, by the way, and globalist control regimes in Europe. I mean, it is what it is. It's just true. Also, dear friends, okay, I already spoke about this news that Putin and Trump share presidential limo to Alaska summit. Yes, this is true. I did not like it at all. But yet again, I guess Russian security service was given access to this limo to make sure that Russian president is safe and secure there, right? Also, RIA Novosti is reporting that aide of Russian President Yuri Ushakov answered the question about the potential meeting between Putin, Trump, and Zelensky. Let me give you his answer. The issue of holding a trilateral meeting between Russian and US President Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, as well as Vladimir Zelensky, has not yet been raised during the Russian-American contacts, said the Russian leader's aide for international affairs, Yuri Ushakov, following talks in Alaska. Prior to this meeting with Russian President, Trump said on quite a few occasions that next meeting gonna be between Putin and Zelensky, and he might join this meeting, but maybe he was making such statements for domestic purposes, for US and the Western public. Probably that is the case because during the summit itself, as Ushakov is saying, issue of this trilateral meeting was not even discussed. No specifics on this matter, right? It's just statements at this point. And even though Russian president has no issue with the face-to-face meeting with Zelensky, he was very clear that, first of all, delegations of two countries have to reach acceptable agreements, and then there will be good enough ground for Russian president to have a meeting with Zelensky. Otherwise, why would he waste time? Isn't it? Vzгляд newspaper is also reporting that Putin suggested Trump to meet in Moscow next time. I already mentioned this, and this might be their case, by the way. I think when the Russian president agreed on initiative of Trump to visit Alaska, simultaneously Moscow issued the invitation for Trump, and he agreed also. That's how this works, isn't it? There is one visit from one leader, then leader of opposite side is also visiting your country. So it might be that Trump will visit Moscow, maybe some other place in Russia. There is a lot of areas, by the way, a lot of cities, a lot of regions that can host highest level negotiations between the two presidents. No doubts about that. Also, interesting detail that U.S. President's special envoy on Ukraine, Kat Kellogg, was not a part of the U.S. delegation, by the way. Steve Witkoff was member of U.S. delegation. He was there, I believe, as his Russian colleague, Kirill Dmitriev, a top professional, by the way. I read some stuff about Kirill Dmitriev, and I was quite impressed. I'm going to tell you, he is a top-level expert in finances, and Russian president chose him for a reason, to be his his special envoy, basically, in economical matters. And I believe Dmitriev has great relationships, or good relationships, let's say this way, good working relationships with Witkoff, and both, based on reports that I see, were there in Alaska and probably play key role to prepare this summit and the topics on which two sides might actually reach an agreement, or maybe already reached agreement during their summit itself. We're going to find out about it, I guess, in relatively short time. But I like this news. I like this news that Kit Kellogg, who is an extreme Russophobe, I believe, his daughter allegedly is involved in certain business of arms supply to Kiev regime and that kind of stuff. So Kit Kellogg is clearly compromised, right, and cannot be perceived by Moscow as some objective individual. And it is good that Washington made this sensible decision to take him out from the delegation. That was a right move. But dear friends, I mentioned, isn't it, that Western media is going crazy, isn't it, about this meeting, Western so-called media, because they don't like at all even to think about possibility that Russia and US, two major nuclear superpowers, are improving relations. It should be opposite, isn't it? Everybody should be in favor of two major nuclear superpowers being on good terms, but this is definitely not the case when it comes to Western so-called elites, Western ruling class, mainly, in main part of it, globalists, if you want to, and their controlled media. But it's not just Western so-called media that is going crazy. Some public figures, by the way, some public figures in Europe, in US also are doing the same. And I'm going to give you a few short videos on that, dear friends, and you be the judge. I mean, you share your take, what you think about these crazies that used to be on high-level positions in US administrations, by the way. For example, let me give you a video of former CIA Director John Brennan, what he's talking about, how insane this element is, and how damaging it was for US society, for US true national interest, that someone like John Brennan was actually head of the CIA. Let me give you some short video of his crazy statements, man. So this is the video on that, I believe.
Just looking at the optics, it's clear that Vladimir Putin felt very confident from the arrival in terms of how he was greeted. Again, an international pariah, a war criminal who was basically embraced by the President of the United States on a red carpet.
I have not heard these so-called elites in the West are addressing Benjamin Netanyahu this way. Someone that actually is guilty in intentional killing of civilians, right? If you take a look at into details, dear friends, you will find out that even though this conflict, Ukrainian crisis, hot phase or military phase of this crisis is going on more than 3 years now, right? Despite that, you might, if you check the actual objective numbers, you're going to find out that in 1 month, Netanyahu's regime, Israeli so-called defense forces, killed, as a result of their actions, more civilians were killed in 1 month than collateral damage or death of civilians as a result of this 3-year plus high-intensity conflict that Russia is engaged in. So this information clearly gives you understanding that Russian troops are actually operating based on all the rules of law, right? And risking their lives in many occasions, risking their lives to save the civilians. While Israeli armed forces have no care about casualties among civilians, and that's why it might be actually their situation when they give an order, most likely it is the case, that they've been given an order to actually kill as many civilians as possible. And we're going to find out about it, one day. But nevertheless, when you have an objective reality that Israel is beloved by US neocons and the US political class and Western political class in general, Israel and the Israeli regime, in 1 month, as a result of its military actions, have killed more civilians than a casualty among civilians during this 3.5 years war, proxy war that Western is waging against Russia. When you know all this, how on earth you gonna believe anything that comes out from Western so-called elites when they are constantly blaming Russia for targeting civilians, which is at this point, I mean, it is even embarrassing that I have to explain anything about it. It's just too obvious that no Russian units have been given order to target civilians, right? And God knows how many Russian militaries lose their lives while operating in a way that make their position worse, but by acting this way, they save the civilians. Why nobody is confronting these criminals, basically, from the West, public figures that are constantly, including media, by the way, that constantly are trying to paint this false narrative that Russia is targeting civilians when it's not true, by the way. It's just factually wrong, right? Unfortunately, there is collateral damage. Unfortunately, during the high-intensity clashes, it's practically impossible to 100% guarantee that no civilian going to be harmed. But there is a huge difference, isn't it, when one side is acting without any care for civilians, like Israel does, and when another side, Russia in this particular case, is fighting with a care about civilians. It's a tremendous difference, right? And that's why Israel, as a result of Israeli actions, in 1 month, by the way, more people are being killed than during this 3.5-year war, proxy war that West is waging against Russia, as a result of military actions of the Russian Federation. But still, I mean, this is the main propaganda, one of the main propaganda narratives, isn't it, of the West, Western ruling class, that Russia is targeting civilians. Russia is targeting civilians. Disgraceful freaking criminals, by the way. Well, that's what these people are. Everybody who says anything like that, that Russia is intentionally targeting civilians. Despicable scum of humanity. That's what everybody is, whoever says anything like that, because it's just not true. It's false. Nevertheless, let's. And by the way, did you hear all those people that are criticizing Russia saying anything about actions of Israel? If they have any principles or morality, why they are quiet when it comes to Israel? I mean, you tell me. Maybe because they've been brought and paid by Israel for decades, not just for years, but decades in many cases. Maybe that is the case. Let's continue.
In the United States. So I think you could see on Putin's face, he felt very, very comfortable. And the fact that he was given a ride then in the presidential...
You see this moment also, and Putin felt comfortable. Putin is one of the, you might like it or not, but Putin is one of the few heavyweights, actual heavyweights when it comes to geopolitics, when it comes to politics, right? So why would anyone assume that Putin would not feel comfortable? What, I mean, how incompetent someone has to be to think that Putin will, in any circumstances, feel like I don't know, man, underdog. No, man, this is I mean, basically, one might even argue only heavyweight that exists in the geopolitics right now. So from where these crazy narratives are coming that, well, Putin was feeling comfortable. I mean, why would not he, for God's sake? Why would not he? You know?
Limousine, the beast. I certainly hope the Secret Service has swept that vehicle very well in terms of any type of vehicle very well in terms of.
And he's complaining that Russian president actually traveled to that military base together with Trump in Trump's presidential car. I don't like this because of the security element, but I guess Russian president's security detail definitely, most likely, had their access to the vehicle and had guaranteed that it's safe, right? But nevertheless, look what this idiot, Brennan, or whatever his freaking name is complaining about. Look, just listen to it.
I certainly hope the Secret Service has swept that vehicle very well in terms of any type of small microchip that might have been put in the vehicle. But
how insane is this guy? And he was leading CIA, by the way. He was director of the CIA. It's crazy, isn't it? It's literally, I mean, you have insane element as a head of CIA. I mean, you cannot made up stories like that, man. It's just too crazy. You cannot even made up this story, man. This moron was CIA director. And he, on full seriousness, on a federal channel in US, is saying that, well, Secret Services have to check the vehicle. Yes, Russian president has no other job to do but to implement some bugs into that limousine, and no one gonna notice it. I mean, how insane is these people, man? How crazy these people are, man. It's unbelievable.
But then in the press conference, Vladimir Putin looked chipper. He looked upbeat. He looked like somebody who was satisfied with the meeting, not as though he was somebody who was given an ultimatum about what's going on in Ukraine.
I mean, you tried, isn't it? No one can say that Trump did not try to issue ultimatum. They did, man. It did not work. You cannot threaten Russia. You cannot scare Russia. I mean, it is time, everybody in this world, to realize that you cannot talk with Russia with ultimatums. Every time you try, you're going to lose. That's how it was historically. That's how it's going to be forever, right? So this idiot, man, what is he talking about? This freaking moron. He actually thinks that you can talk to Russia with ultimatums? And he was expecting that Trump would start issuing ultimatums to Russian president? I mean, what the hell, man? And these type of morons are invited in Western media, in Western TVs, time after time after time, day in, day out, right? And Western public is listening to these crazies 24/7, and no wonder majority of societies in the West are being brainwashed, by the way, so much so that I guess at this point, this majority would not ever be able to actually face the reality and acknowledge the reality. That's how bad situation is, and why should anybody be surprised? I mean, when you actually have this level of crazy propaganda in the West, 24/7, by the way.
He did look very upbeat. And Donald Trump, he spoke for a very short period of time. I know people think that it was Putin who didn't want to take questions. That might have been the case. But also, I think the American side didn't want to take questions either, because there's no good answers to what has happened. They were making reference to an agreement.
No, man, that's another also false narrative that they're going to now push, that, well, they didn't take questions because they have no answers. No, Russian president has answer on everything, right? On any question that Western so-called journalists would come up with. But behavior, by the way, how they are behaving, Here in Russia, by the way, you have to behave respectfully, right? Everywhere, on the street, by the way, in any meeting, no matter it's between ordinary people or high-ranking officials, you have to behave with respect. You have to demonstrate in your behavior that you are a cultured individual. You did not come out from freaking forest yesterday. You are actually civilized. And it is very important. But did you see? Probably many of you see, isn't it? Fragments, at least, of behavior of Western so-called journalists. It was total embarrassment, by the way, for the profession. How they can call themselves journalists. How they are behaving, though. It's total embarrassment, isn't it? And why would either Russian president or US president, by the way, would want to speak to those freaking morons that think they are journalists, either from, I don't know, MSNBC or BBC or CNN or whatever, right? That's, in my opinion, that's the reason why presidents did not answer the questions. I mean, Russian journalists they did behave respectfully. They could ask questions, but it's traditionally you have journalists from all sides, right? So because of the crazy, uncultured behavior of Western so-called journalists, well, Russian journalists also did not have the opportunity to ask the questions, which is unfortunate. But yet again, man, I saw videos and first reaction was, what the hell is wrong with these people? Why they are shouting over each other, man? Where are these people grown up? Oh, I don't know, man. Even on the streets, by the way, you have certain rules, right, of behavior. If you grow up on the streets, nothing to be said if you grown up in a family. So where those so-called journalists of Western media outlets grown up, man? How come they are this uncultured? I don't know, man. I don't know. But anyways, let's finish this video, this short video from this
agreement, but it was nothing at all. There's no mention about a ceasefire, anything at all. So I think Donald Trump realized throughout the day that he was getting played by Putin, but also I think Donald Trump just put himself in this position.
No, Donald Trump did not realize that he was not played, by the way. Russian president was straight and direct. And I think Donald Trump understood this, and he would appreciate this. That he is talking to a leader that is not tries to amuse him or something. Someone that is, clearly, knows what he's doing and talks with him with respect, obviously, but from strong position. And I think Trump would appreciate that. After all, he's a developer from New York, isn't it? And he had to deal with some strong people in his life, I guess, right? Let's continue.
He was the one who offered this meeting. He was the one who invited Putin to U.S. territory. He was the one that put together this summit that clearly there was very little preparation for, and they came out empty-handed. So I think when I look at...
It's not empty-handed, by the way. They didn't come out with, empty-handed. I think we have good enough indicators to think that on terms of bilateral relationships, I think certain progress was made between the sides, and there is a certain understanding which way Washington and Moscow will move, right? Which is a good, by the way. This is, if my understanding is correct, then this actually reinforces this cautious optimism of mine that maybe Washington will actually pull out U.S. from this proxy war that globalists are waging against Russia. And also, when it comes to Ukrainian crisis, I think both sides have a good enough understanding where they are standing, right? Washington knows where Moscow stands, what is Moscow's principal positions, and Moscow also knows where Washington stands. That's it, right? And that's why I guess Trump said in an interview with the Fox News that it's up to Zelensky now and the Europeans. Do they want peace or not? Because Moscow's position is very clear, right? So this former director, by the way, of CIA, which acts now as a sort of expert for US media, is clearly out of touch with reality. And I just shared this video to show your level of hysteria, by the way, right? Among these so-called public figures. It's crazy, man. It's crazy what's happening there. A few more news, dear friends. This live stream is already 1.5 hours. So I'm gonna finalize this stream. But let me also give you a few more, short clips. For example, U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal, who, along with Lindsey Graham, co-authored the sanctioning Russia bill, is went on CNN to cry, basically demanding more weapons for the Kyiv regime. Let me show you this video also. I mean, they are hysterical, by the way. They are hysterical. Just look at this.
Kind of summits. Did anything come out of this in your mind?
Nothing came out of this summit. It was a nothing burger. It was a shrug of the shoulders. But I will tell you, Anderson, my stomach turned when I heard the President of the United States characterize Vladimir Putin as his fabulously good friend. Vladimir Putin is a war criminal. He has directed soldiers to kill women and children.
Did you see same stuff? They have. It seems like they have one boss who gives them notice what to say and how. Former CIA director and Blumenthal, they have a same freaking false narrative to talk about, right? They are receiving memos, kind of. They've been briefed or something. I don't know what the hell is wrong with them, but they are constantly pushing with their similar false narratives. Right? Did you ever hear this Blumenthal or whatever his freaking name is criticizing Israel for criminal actions, for actual crimes against humanity that was committed by Israel? I don't think you have heard anything about that, because this freaking moron is a Zionist, right? As his fellow Senator Lindsey Graham is. Neocons and the Zionists. Anyways, let's listen.
Children and bury them in mass grave. He's kidnapped children as we speak. The reality on the ground is that people are bleeding and dying all around Ukraine because Putin is continuing to bomb them. And at the front, he's continuing to pummel the brave Ukrainian soldiers who were defending the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, the town of Probovsk. And
this freaking moron don't even know what he's talking about. Lugansk People's Republic is completely liberated. There is not a single settlement in LPR where Kyiv regime has its forces. Kyiv regime or NATO mercenaries have their presence. But this moron has no idea what he's talking about, basically.
This war is continuing. There's no ceasefire. There's no deal. And the reason is Putin doesn't want a deal. He doesn't want peace.
Freaking hysterical. No, there is no ceasefire because globalists control regimes in Europe, UK, France, Germany, and others. They're allies among neocons in US, and clearly Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal, this moron, are their allies, right? Because they don't want to acknowledge that they lost this proxy war against Russia. This is the reason why there is no peace reached already. And one should always keep in mind, dear friends, that in 2022, in March, April, there was a preliminary agreement already between Moscow and Kyiv, right, to de-escalate. But globalists and globalist control regimes, their allies, derailed those talks, right? Derailed it. And that's why conflict continues until now. We all know this. But nevertheless, I wanted to show you these few short clips of this hysterical former in one case and current in another public, high-ranking officials or the public figures. Okay, let me give you a few more news, dear friends, that I have prepared for this news segment. UK's Defense Secretary John Haley is still dreaming of sending British troops to Ukraine. I'm going to give you a short video of that too. They might dream about it. They might actually dream about it, but Russian side was very clear, isn't it? Russian side was very clear that if NATO countries will send if and when NATO countries will send their troops into Kiev-controlled territory, Russia will treat them as combatants, and action will be taken against them, right? So they can try. They can try. Let's listen to.
To put boots on the ground, British boots on the ground. In other words, for British soldiers to risk their lives to defend Ukraine's borders. It's a yes or no, is it not?
Well, a big decision for any defence secretary and prime minister, but the prime minister has made clear that he's ready to consider putting UK boots on the ground in the circumstances of a negotiated peace. If we can play a part, as we're planning to do with many other nations, to reinforce the Ukrainians' ability in the medium term to be able to deter Russia in future for themselves, and to reassure the Ukrainians that just as we have during the battle, we and other nations will stay with them during negotiations, and we will stay with them to try and secure the long-term peace. Because in the end, look, a secure Ukraine means a secure Europe, and it benefits Britain.
So yes, they are dreaming about sending their troops in this former Soviet Republic. They are still dreaming about achieving strategical defeat of Russia, which is not going to happen. But well, for time being, unfortunately, we will have to observe this. This act of from Western ruling class, globalists, their assets, their act of being tough, right? While in reality, without US, by the way, European so-called powers are paper tigers. We all know that, isn't it? Russian armed forces will literally decimate whole British army in about a month's time, by the way. 2 months maximum. If you take a look at the rate of losses on part of Kiev regime's forces that are much more battle-hardened and much more capable than British army, then it is obvious that the whole British army will last on a battlefield 2 months max or less than that. And they still are bragging about being tough. I mean, it's sad, man. It's just sad. At this point, we here in Russia not even laugh at this situation. It's just too pathetic, too sad, right? I wish British society will wake up and do something to replace these morons in their elites with some actually true, adequate people that will serve best interests of the citizens of the UK, right? I wish, I hope they will be able to do so, man, because they deserve better than this, for sure. Few more news, dear friends. Well, headline from Bloomberg, US-Russia summit shows how little Europe matters in a Trump world. And, well, it's not a Trump world, by the way. US-Russia summit shows how little Europe matters, period. And after all, I'm saying for a reason that give it another 20, 30 years and due to crazy elites, insane elites in Europe, so-called elites, this part of the world is going to become either loosely relevant or completely irrelevant part of Eurasian continent. That's their destiny, by the way. If only chance Europe has is if societies in European countries would actually wake up and manage to change their direction, trajectory of their countries, reclaim their homelands, and put actual decent people into position of power, into position of elites. That's the only chance they have. But is it even theoretically possible that a majority of societies in Europe wake up? I don't know. I mean, I'm skeptical about that. Also, interestingly, dear friends, I don't know, maybe you missed this information, but Trump had a phone conversation with the Belarusian president, Lukashenko, Alexander Lukashenko, and in his True Social post, Trump said that they discussed many topics. Purpose of the call was to thank Lukashenko for the release of 16 prisoners. This happened after his representative went to Minsk about 2 months ago, right? And now Trump is saying that there is discussion also in place about release of some 1,300 additional prisoners. I guess U.S. is engaged in negotiations with Minsk to release all the activists, Western assets, basically, citizens of Belarus, but Western assets that were participating in a coup d'etat attempt a couple of years ago, right, that failed miserably. I don't know why Minsk should agree on that, but if Minsk will actually agree to release these Western assets, they have to be, sent to Europe then. Let the Europeans keep them there, as they are keeping this so-called opposition leader of Belarus, Tikhanovskaya, or whatever her name is, man. Do you remember when at one point West tried to make from Tikhanovskaya something like a fake president of Venezuela? I cannot even remember the name of that freaking guy, man. Washington said that we don't recognize Maduro as a president, so now we're gonna name president of Venezuela this freaking nobody, and that nobody is, I don't know, is in US still, right? And West tried to do something similar with Tikhanovskaya in Belarus, and I don't even know where she is right now, somewhere in the Baltics, I guess, maybe in Poland, right? Well, maybe Minsk will release some 1,300 assets of the West, Western secret services, Western NGOs, and so on, but only on condition that they're gonna leave Belarus alone, that is, left the country. In that case, it will make sense. Otherwise, no, man, these assets, foreign assets, by the way, have to be treated as traitors, right? Because they are traitors. And for treason, they can be only 2 sentences, either death penalty or imprisonment for life. That's it. They can be no any other charges, in my personal opinion. So, I don't know. Nevertheless, there was a talk between Lukashenko and Trump, which is quite interesting also. RIA Novosti reporting that Russian air defense systems on duty overnight intercepted 29 drones. 10 drones were intercepted over the Rostov region. In Stavropol Krai, 9 drones were intercepted, 4 in the Kursk region, 3 in the Sea of Azov. In the Belgorod and Bryansk regions, as well as the Krasnodar territory, 1 drone each was downed by Russian air defense systems. Information is based on the latest update of Defense Ministry. Also, RIA Novosti is reporting that Russian armed forces, and this is also confirmed by Defense Ministry of the Russian Federation, that Russian troops liberated Sherbinovka and Iskra settlements in the DPR. Also, dear friends, Alexandrograd settlement is liberated in the DPR by Russian forces, according to a number of sources. The Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky has announced a mandatory evacuation in Drushkovka settlement as well as the villages of Andreevka, Varvarovka, Novoandreevka, and Roganskoye in parts of Donetsk region still controlled by Kyiv regime's militants. So situation for them is getting worse and worse. I mean, Kyiv regime, and these settlements are located, by the way, on the direction of Russian recent breakthrough on the northern flank of Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration. Also, day before yesterday, 84 Russian POWs were released as a result of POW exchange by Kyiv regime, and the Russian side also transferred 84 POWs to opposite side. RIA Novosti is reporting that deployment point of foreign mercenaries were destroyed in the Chernigov region. Later on today, maybe we will learn about this strike. I would not be surprised at all if we will find out that some French and British citizens were among these foreign mercenaries that were targeted with Russian long-range precise strike. Also, the French TASS news agency is reporting that Ukrainian armed forces are trying to conduct a crossing of the Dnieper River about twice in a week and are suffering heavy losses. This information was shared to TASS by sources in the Russian security agencies. So at least twice a week, the regime is sending on suicidal missions its forces. No surprises there, by the way, no surprises. And let me once again, dear friends, share with you this information that Russia disrupted Ukraine's missile program. Moscow has, I reported about it in previous update, but I think this information worth our attention to repeat. So Moscow has thwarted Kyiv's plans to produce Sapsan missile systems for strikes deep into Russia. This was reported by FSB. The Federal Security Service, in cooperation with the Ministry of Defense, as a result of joint special operation, inflicted the fire damage, kinetic damage, let's say, on the facilities of the military-industrial complex of Ukraine involved in the creation of operational tactical missile systems. The FSB stated operational details are that Ukraine's secretly developed a missile program using technology and the stockpiles left over from the USSR. And Western countries, by the way, Western countries were also helping with this, and Germany was financing all this stuff. And you all remember, I think this information is important because you remember last several weeks there was too many statements from Europe, isn't it, that Kyiv regime gonna produce its own long-range missile systems. Germany was actively promoting this idea, UK and some others. And of course, Russian security services, Russian militaries pay attention to these developments. They know perfectly well NATO countries were involved in this, and action was taken. Action was taken, and this program was basically neutralized. FSB had information on the production of these Sapsan missiles, including the exact coordinates of the enterprises involved in the project. In May, Vladimir Zelensky met with the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, having documentation on the missile complex in hand. Berlin financed the program, and I guess NATO countries also transferred whatever technology was needed to build these missiles. Production was launched at the defense enterprises in Dnipropetrovsk and the Sumy regions, including the Pavlograd chemical plant and the Shostka state plant Zvizda. In theory, the radius of destruction, range of these missiles included Moscow, Minsk, Vitebsk, Kaluga, Tula, Vladimir, Donetsk, and their nuclear center in Sarov. So, if successful, then NATO countries and their proxy regime would have quite a capable long-range missile system. And it is great that Russian security services, together with defense ministry, thwarted this attempt of theirs. As a result of Russian strikes, the technical base for the production of long-range ballistic missiles was destroyed. As a result of operation, the Ukrainian military-industrial complex suffered colossal damage. For its part, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that in July, the Russian army struck design bureaus involved in this program, missile weapons assembly plants, factories for the production of a fuel for missiles, Western air defense systems that covered these facilities for Patriot air defense missile launchers and the AN/MPQ-65 radar station. The department added that the information about the disruption of Kiev's plans was confirmed by several independent sources. So let me end this news segment, dear friends, on this positive news. Good one, especially for us, for Russia, and for all the Russian supporters. And this is it, dear friends, for today's news segment. Before I'll join community chat for a couple of minutes, let me share with you. There was one super chat on Rumble during the stream. Let me share with you this super chatter. So, Blorp, thank you very much for your $5 donation and the super chatter. And Blorp is commenting that Lavrov's sweatshirt was a bomb. Yes, I mean, he was, he was good. He was kind of trolling, isn't it? If you don't know, dear friends, Lavrov was wearing a SSS shirt, T-shirt with their SSSR sign, or USSR, that is, right? And many people paid attention to it, obviously, and that's what Blorp is referring to. Thank you very much, Blorp, for your comment, for your donation and support. Truly grateful. Thank you. And well, there was no another super chat or donation during the stream, so let me for a few minutes now. What? There was a boosty also. Okay, there was also a boosty, by the way. Let me also highlight this. There was a donation on a boosty from Malina. So there is no comment from Malina. Just a donation of 78 rubles, which is $1. Thank you very much, Malina, for your donation. I appreciate your support. Thank you. And well, let me join community chat now, dear friends, for a couple of minutes, and I will just remind you that tomorrow we will have a traditional big community chat and fundraising. Hopefully yesterday's stream will work out good. Okay. I hope so. Tomorrow's stream. Yes, tomorrow's stream. Well, I'm tired, man. I just, after 36-hour journey on a train, I came home. I mean, we came home this morning, and I began straight away preparing this program. Right, I had not had like 5-minute rest even. So, sorry if I was a little chaotic during this program, but hopefully you did like the news segment, and if so, dear friends, please like the video on both channels, on YouTube and Rumble. It might help to deal with the algorithm and reach wider audience. That's left side crew is commenting. Levan, are you to apologize to Putin for saying he is sailing out Russia and surrendering? I'm not going to apologize to nobody, by the way, not to Putin, not to anybody, especially for something that I have not said. So why should I apologize for something that I have not said? Or maybe you interpreted my words this way, but this is not what I meant. While being critical about Putin's agreement on that meeting, I said that I think this is a waste of time. And it's not just me, many people thought that this meeting would be a waste of time. And there is a possibility that that's exactly how it's going to turn out. Just because I'm cautiously optimistic, as many people, as far as I can tell here in Russia, about a potential outcome of this meeting, it does not mean that eventually someone not going to influence Trump today or tomorrow, and things going to turn out to be complete waste of time when it comes to this meeting. So, I was critical that Russian president agreed on this meeting, and I had my reasons for that. So why should I apologize for having an opinion? But you come up with a very strong statement in your question, which is not something that I said, and therefore therefore I'm not going to apologize to nobody. Matthew K, I welcome you in the community. Earlier, Matthew wrote that he's subscriber now, and welcome to our tiny but very friendly community, Matthew. Question from Matthew is that what did they agree to? I hope it's not just for U.S. sake. Well, it is difficult to say what kind of preliminary agreements, potential preliminary agreements, two presidents and two delegations managed to reach. But I think from the statements that we already heard, we can assume that there is a certain directions in bilateral relationships between the sides, that sides may be on the same page. Cooperation in the energy field, cooperation in rare earth field, potentially cooperation in regards to Northern Sea route that U.S. greatly interested in. We all remember Trump and his beef with Denmark about Greenland, and you think where the roots are of that beef. It's obviously potential of the Northern Sea routes, by the way, right? That's gonna replace all the main trade routes, maritime trade routes, in next 20 to 30 years, right? So I think there is a great deal of potential in terms of cooperation between Russia and US, and I think that's the direction that side agreed on. When it comes to Ukrainian crisis, I think Russian president tell the Trump that well, that's our demands, right? That's our conditions. We are winning on the battlefield, right? We are winning on the battlefield. We have an upper hand there. Your country is engaged in this proxy war against Russia, and it is very destructive for your country. You did not start this war. You don't want this, but well, U.S. was controlled by globalists during the Democrat administration, right? So now, I mean, you make the choice. Either you want to keep U.S. in this proxy war, which is damaging U.S. greatly, especially in the long run, or you're going to pull out U.S., right? And if you want to pull out U.S., I'm offering you off-ramp, right? Our terms are well known. So talk to your colleagues in Europe, talk to Zelensky, and then made up your mind. Do you want to be this directly engaged in this war against Russia or not? That would be Russian position, I guess, by the way. I'm obviously just speculating now, but I guess that's what Russian president said in a polite way, right? In a very diplomatic, polite way, but that's what he explained to him. And I guess Trump understood that, yes, I mean, all the cards are in Russian hands, so it is what it is, right? And now either Zelensky and Europeans agree, European so-called elites agree on Russian terms for lasting peace to be reached, or crisis continues until eventually Western ruling class, European elites will have no option but to agree, but on a much tougher conditions for them. That's it. I'm glad, by the way. I'm glad that Russian president directly during the press conference highlighted, right? And I guess during their communication, also their behind closed doors communication, also what Russian stands are. And Russian president was very clear. I mean, we have to address root causes, and addressing root causes means addressing security architecture, by the way, in Europe and in the world, which will obviously include Russian national security interests to be also taken in account. Harvard, their dot connector, commenting, the Western establishment is in full damage control. They won't let Trump visit Moscow. They will JFK him first. Well, globalists are in desperation. That's for sure, by the way. And globalists control majority of European states, if not all, and they have quite a tools in their disposal to actually commit a kinetical strike on US, on anybody in US, by the way, including US president, right? So they might actually try to, if US will begin pulling out from this proxy war against Russia, globalists might actually try to take out Trump if they would not be able to blackmail him, to force him basically to submission. It's a possibility. I'm on the same page with you on that. So therefore, I don't know, Trump's security apparatus have to be on high alert constantly. It is what it is. Mihai Low is commenting, Trump is erratic, he is unstable, he is not to be trusted. Yet again, dear friends, I don't think Russian president gonna trust her blindly to anybody, Trump or whomever. If it's all about certain steps, actual concrete steps on the ground, and the mechanisms to make sure that if agreements are reached, these agreements gonna be honored by all sides, right? So therefore, in this regard, I don't think Russian side will be as naive as it was, for example, when Minsk I and Minsk II agreements were reached. I think Moscow is going to be much more cautious. Have to be much more cautious. So I see what your statement. I'm on the same page, basically. I don't think Trump can be trusted, right? But yet again, if America First forces will regain control in Washington, and formally at least Trump's supposed to be representative of America First force, right? Then in that case, I think Washington will, while reaching agreements, certain agreements with Moscow, then Washington will take all the necessary steps to reassure Moscow that they are serious about the escalation and improvements in relationships. But no one gonna trust them blindly, by the way. Definitely not the Russian president, we had enough of promises from the Western elites, and the Russian president himself was very upset, isn't it, when he had to acknowledge that he was lied by his European counterparts, by his Western counterpart, in terms of these Minsk I, Minsk II agreements, right? And he was very upset about it, and I don't think he's gonna ever forget that, or forgive, for that matter. You know, I was a bit nervous before this meeting, by the way, because you just never know, isn't it? You just never know. But when I saw that part of press conference when Russian president gave a brilliant speech, by the way, you know, I received all the answers that I needed. So, you know, I'm chill now. I received all the answers that I needed. Russian national interests are well known, and West have to deal with it. Either they are taking the deal, agreeing on Russian terms, or Russia will continue until all the goals are reached to secure people in this former Soviet Republic, especially people in Russian new regions, and all the national security matters to be addressed. You know. Naturally, aspirated Russian ally is asking, should the Russian Federation turn the SMO, special military operation, into a counter-terrorist operation and put an end to their conflict? This is a possibility. This is a clearly possibility, dear friend, especially when, you know, why? Because there is more and more evidences of Kiev regime's direct involvement in a terrorist attack on the Russian Federation, including intentional attacks on Russian civilians. I remind you, dear friends, that 2024 attack on Crocus City Hall in the Moscow region, right on outskirts of Moscow, when hundreds of civilians were killed and wounded by terrorists who were working for a Kiev regime. There is more and more evidences of direct link of Kiev regime to that terrorist attack, and literally on daily basis, media is publishing more and more news on that. And there is other cases also. I think there is a possibility that in certain circumstances, Moscow will transform this special military operation into a counter-terrorist operation, with all the consequences that will follow for leadership of that terrorist regime in Kiev and its militants. So it's a possibility. No one can rule out such a possibility, I think. So maybe that's exactly what is going to happen. Literally on daily basis, dear friends, Russian Federal Security Services are neutralizing assets of the Kiev regime, literally on daily basis. FSB is neutralizing assets of the Kiev regime that were engaged in a terrorist activity. So there is plenty of evidences, not just Crocus City Hall attack, but there is unfortunately dozens and dozens and dozens of additional factual evidences of terrorist activity and terrorist nature of the Kiev regime, right? So therefore, I think discussions are taking place in the Kremlin, between the Kremlin and security services, to transform this special military operation into a counter-terrorist operation, which will, if happens, will untie hands of the Russian security services and militaries, right? And I guess it's up to president's decision now, right? He has his own calculus, his own understanding of the situation, and I think he will make decision on that. We might see counter-terrorist operation in a place. It's clearly a possibility, I think. Nathan Dunning is commenting, U.S. sanctions go back to full effect tomorrow. But I'm not sure I did understand your question, Nathan. Maybe this question is not to me, then my apologies in that case. But I believe all the sanctions that U.S. has imposed on Russia are already in effect. So, dear friends, it's already like 2 hours and 16, 17 minutes. This stream is taking place. If I may, I will end this stream now. I will just take I saw a question and I lost it, by the way. Nidish Kumar was asking something. Okay, my apologies. Maybe I'm just too tired, man. Okay, dear friends, thank you very much for your attention and support, for your time, and I hope you will join tomorrow's big community chat and fundraising stream. I will let you know about beginning some 30 minutes before stream starts. It's gonna be, I guess it's gonna be 11 o'clock in the morning by Moscow time, but nevertheless, I'm gonna let you know if some changes there. I'm gonna let you know through my Telegram channel and Twitter X page, and also community page on YouTube. This is it for now. Have a wonderful day, great weekend, and take care. Bye.